I knew it was coming the moment I walked into the room and saw only two chairs. No HR, no note-taker, just Daniel Mercerth, new CEO, sitting with a folder in front of him, and a look he'd probably practiced in front of a mirror. "Close the door, Ethan." I did. He gestured to the seat across from him. "This isn't easy." That made one of us. Daniel was 35, MBA from Wharton, one of those culture-first evangelists who said things like synergy sprint and human capital. I'd spent the last 6 months watching him dismantle everything we'd built. "You've been instrumental in getting us to where we are," he said, "but we're pivoting now. New clients, digital channels. We need people aligned with that vision." "And I'm not?" I asked calmly. He glanced at the folder, didn't answer, just pushed a paper across the table. Voluntary termination agreement. It even had today's date already typed in. "I know this is sudden," he said, "but we're offering 3 months severance and a glowing recommendation." I didn't look at the paper. I looked at him. "Do you know how many contracts I closed last year, Daniel?" He cleared his throat. "We're shifting our priorities. You're excellent with legacy clients, but that's not where the market is going. Legacy clients pay 70% of our bills. Not for long." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood up and said, "Thank you." He blinked. "That's it? You've already made the decision. Why pretend this is a discussion?" He opened his mouth, maybe to soften the moment. I walked out before he could. That's when the silence hit me. Not just the quiet of a hallway, but the quiet of being don't know by choice, but by decision made behind closed doors and passed down like a memo. My office was already packed. Someone had done it while I was in the meeting. My nameplate was gone. I picked up the box laptop, a few framed photos, and the little wooden chess knight I kept on my desk and walked out without a word. I passed coworkers who looked away. A few offered sympathetic nods, but most didn't know, or didn't care. That's how these things go. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for 15 minutes, just staring at the concrete wall, not thinking, just adjusting. At home, my wife Lena met me at the door. She didn't ask questions. She just poured coffee, handed me a blanket, and sat beside me on the couch. After a while, I said, "They let me go. Said I didn't fit the vision." She nodded. "You never fit into someone else's small version of your worth." I smiled faintly. "That's a nice thing to say." "It's not a compliment," she said. "It's a fact." That night, I didn't touch the laptop. I didn't rewrite my resume. I didn't scroll job listings. Instead, I opened the notebook I'd kept for 10 years. Not for numbers, though. There were plenty but for names. Names of people I'd worked with, walked with through business expansions, product pivots, supply chain nightmares, and economic storms. Clients didn't just work with me. They trusted me. I remembered birthdays, kids' names, anniversaries. I'd shown up to hospital rooms and funerals. I'd returned calls at 2 a.m. when panic hit after a market crash. That kind of relationship doesn't end with a signature on a severance agreement. I wrote one sentence at the top of a new page. They don't own the trust. I do. I didn't send a resignation letter, but I was about to make the loudest exit of my life without saying a single dramatic word. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was anxious, but because something in my mind had gone completely still. The noise of humiliation, anger, confusion, all replaced by a strange clarity. I wasn't thinking about vengeance. I was thinking about truth. And the truth was this. I'd been the face, the voice, the anchor of trust for nearly a decade at Virion Systems. My name wasn't on the building, but it was in people's phone nest, the one they dialed when things broke, when forecasts failed, when competitors made bold offers that somehow never felt right. They hadn't just fired me. They'd unplugged the only outlet through which some of our biggest clients still believed in the company. At 6:08 a.m., I opened my laptop. It felt strange booting up something I no longer owed to a payroll, like a tool reclaimed. I started by opening a clean document and typed, "Client loyalty map," not a list of revenue, not contract tiers. A map, because this wasn't about numbers, it was about relationships. At the top, I wrote 5 names, not because they were the biggest, but because they were the most personal. Jeremy McCall, Halberton Logistics. Priya Rao, Brightwater Learning Group. Tom Harlow, Blue Creek Manufacturing. Lila Faulkner, Ridge, Vine Hospitality. Dan Chen, Cohesion Tech Partners. These were people who'd invited me to weddings, who'd called me from hospital parking lots, who had, over time, blurred the line between client and friend. I stared at the list for a long time. Then I highlighted the first name, Jeremy McCall. He was Virion's largest logistics client, $12 million in annual systems integration, support, and tech expansion. But more than that, he was someone I'd helped through 3 restructurings and a nasty divorce. We hadn't just talked about APIs, we talked about life. I picked up my phone, stared at his name. No pitch, no agenda, just the truth. I hit call. He picked up on the second ring. "Ward," he said, voice groggy. "Either something's on fire, or you got news." "A little of both." "Talk to me." "I'm no longer with Virion." Silence. Then a quiet exhale. "Hell, they let you go?" "Friday morning." No explanation beyond the usual corporate varnish. "They're morons," he said flatly. "I'm not here to vent. I just didn't want you to hear it from someone else." Jeremy grunted. "They reached out already. Some guy named Kelvin tried to introduce himself as my new point of contact. Sent me a PowerPoint with bullet points and emojis. I laughed, but it was bitter. "I'm not building anything yet," I said. "Just taking stock." Jeremy's voice changed less irritation, more deliberation. "Well, if you do build something, I'd rather keep working with the guy who understood our operation better than our own CTO did. Just say the word." I didn't say anything right away, but that was enough. The first line was drawn. I ended the call, stood up, and walked to the window. The sun had just started cutting through the fog outside. Charlotte glimmered with possibility. The next call was harder. Priya Rao was one of the most principled people I'd ever worked with, CEO of an education tech nonprofit with tight margins and even tighter ethics. I'd helped her company scale from a 4-person startup to a national name in school infrastructure. She answered mid-morning, calm as always. "Ethan, are you okay? You've heard? Dan from Cohesion messaged me, said your name wasn't on last week's project notes. That never happens. I'm out. They let me go." She was quiet. "I'm sorry," she said. "That's a loss for them." I paused. "I just wanted you to know. No pressure, no implications." Priya sighed. "It's not pressure, Ethan. You're part of how we grew. We never felt like just another ticket in a support queue. If you end up building something new, I'd like to hear about it. We'll be reevaluating partnerships next quarter anyway." That made 2. By noon, I'd made 5 calls. Each one the same. Honest, low-key, non-sales. But the reactions were consistent. Not shock. Validation. By 2:30 p.m., I had 3 voicemails from other former clients. I hadn't called them, but the whispers had begun. That's the thing about professional trust. It doesn't vanish, it moves. And when the thing people trust disappears, they follow it. At 4:07 p.m., my inbox pinged. Subject: "Intro heard you may be available." From Darren Leto, CEO of Vortex Systems. Vortex had been circling us for years, never fully onboarded, always skeptical of Virion's layered bureaucracy. But I'd been the one person they trusted to give them clean numbers, not gloss. Now, he was reaching out to me directly. "Ethan, word travels. If you're building something new or just consulting for now, let's talk. We have some projects coming up, and we'd prefer to work with someone who actually listens." I stared at the message for a long moment, then hit reply. That evening, Lena made pasta and poured wine. We ate in the kitchen while the dog snoozed under the table. "You made calls today," she said. Not a question. I nodded. 5. Got responses from 9. "Of course you did." I looked at her. "This doesn't feel like revenge," I said. "It feels like coming home." She smiled. "Then maybe this is where you were always meant to start." Later that night, I opened a blank page. Title: Northline. Strategic. Phase 1. Foundations. And beneath it, Legal Entity Research. Banking Setup. Website Domain. Availability. Email Infrastructure. Compliance Consultant. Contract Templates. But most importantly, Client Transition Protocol. Ethics First. Because if I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. At 11:42 p.m., I received a final message for the day. From Kelvin Joe. Subject: Virion Client Continuity Plan. "Hi, Ethan. Just wanted to check if you're willing to assist in the handover of your former accounts to ensure smooth continuity. Appreciate your cooperation and professionalism." I read it twice, then closed the email without replying. Continuity? They broke it the moment they forgot who built it. 3 days after my final call with Priya, I walked into a shared office space on East Moorhead, tucked between a dentist's office and a vegan cafe that smelled like ambition and burnt espresso. The front desk, clerk early 20s, nose ring, probably didn't know a single thing about supply chain, Logistics handed me a visitor badge and a plastic key card. Northline? She asked, glancing at her screen. Is that your startup? Something like that. I'd rented a 6-month lease on a 2-room suite. One for me, one for growth. Growth. For now, was a desk with no one at it and a small stack of printer paper labeled Client Onboarding Concepts. The windows were tall. The carpet smelled new. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I stood in the middle of the room, still wearing the blazer I didn't need anymore, and whispered the words I'd avoided saying out loud until that moment. This is real. At 9:17 a.m., I opened a Google Doc titled Northline Strategic, Day 1. The checklist was modest. File LLC. Open business bank account. Find compliance consultant. Choose a CRM system. Set up encrypted client portal. Draft core service model. Contact Diana. Diana Lee had been Virion's outside legal counsel for 5 years before she resigned quietly, after watching one too many contracts pushed through without ethical review. We'd stayed in Tucson on occasional lunch. A few referrals, and I trusted her more than any in-house lawyer I'd ever worked with. I emailed her 2 lines. Starting something new. Need a compliance-first structure. Can we meet this week? She replied in less than 10 minutes. Yes. Tomorrow. My office. 2 p.m. Bring vision. Not pitch decks. I smiled. That's why I'd called her. The rest of the day passed in controlled chaos. Bank forms, EIN requests, insurance quotes. I'd spent years helping other companies scale, but now realized how little you actually know until you're doing it for yourself. At 1:05 p.m., I opened the Northline inbox. 12 messages already. 4 were automated registrations. 5 were client inquiries. 3 were unexpected. 1 was from Tom Harlow, CEO of Blue Creek Manufacturing. Heard you're out. They tried sending someone in for Q2 prep. I sent him out. We're ready to move when you are. Another from Lila Faulkner, Hospitality Group Director, and the only executive who once sent my daughter a college graduation card. I'm tired of feeling like a spreadsheet line. Tell me when you're live. We'll jump. The last was from Dan Chen at Cohesion Tech. We've got a large-scale rollout in August. I want your fingerprints on it. You working solo, or should I bring my procurement guy in? I stared at the screen, speechless. I hadn't made a single outbound pitch. And yet, here they were. By 3 p.m., I had started building the core service promise for Northline Strategic. We don't scale by volume. We scale by depth. That night, over dinner, Lena asked the question that mattered most. Are you scared? I thought about it. Yes, I said. But it feels like the right kind of fear. Like what? Like standing on a roof, looking at the edge, and knowing you finally built your own ladder down. She reached across the table, then climbed carefully. But don't stop. The next day, Lee and Cordell Law, Charlotte office. Diana's office was exactly as I remembered: organized chaos, towering file stacks, and a whiteboard with phrases like due diligence to delay and precedent is not permission. She wore her signature navy suit and a clipped ponytail, eyes sharp as ever. Start talking, she said, not unkindly. I outlined Northline. Not as a rebellion, not as a vendetta, but as a model of restoration, a place where professionals could work without compromising trust to hit quarterly OKRs. She listened, scribbled notes, asked hard questions. Are you planning to actively recruit your former clients? She asked finally. Number, I'm just being visible. They're coming to me. Good. Keep it that way. No breach, no gray area. She stood and walked to her filing cabinet. Here, she said, handing me a manila folder. LLC structure, sample engagement contracts, operating agreement templates. I'll formalize these once you choose your custodian partner. I'm meeting 2 firms next week. Choose carefully, she said. Some look clean, but leak liability. You're building on reputation. You can't afford a single crack. We shook hands. Nothing ceremonial, just mutual respect. Friday, Northline office. My desk was now functional. Dual monitors, encrypted messaging setup, onboarding documents reviewed by Diana, and a bare-bones version of the client dashboard built by a freelance dev I'd worked with years ago. At 11:27 a.m., a call came in. Blocked number. I answered anyway. Ethan Ward? A woman's voice asked. Yes. This is Carly Rutledge, head of client strategy at Bridgepoint Capital. We're friends of Jeremy McCall. I stood up. Jeremy said you're someone who listens. We're looking to move $30 million in assets off our current vendor. You're not a brokerage, correct? Correct. We're consultative strategy, not a transaction shop. Good. Can we talk Monday? Yes, I said. I'll make time. After I hung up, I stared out the window. What had started as a name on a document was now a beacon. That weekend, I finally allowed myself a moment, not to celebrate, but to reflect. I pulled out the notebook I'd started writing in the day I was let go. On a fresh page, I wrote, "Some exits aren't losses. They're invitations." Then underneath, next week's goals: finalize custodian, lock in 2 onboarding clients, hire a part-time assistant, prepare website for launch, decline Kelvin's second email. Because yes, he emailed again. Friday afternoon. Hi Ethan, just circling back. If you're available for a knowledge handoff next week, we'd appreciate the support in maintaining continuity. No signature, no tone, just protocol. I smiled, then archived it without responding. Some things don't need closure, especially when you're building something better from scratch. By the time Northline Strategic was 2 weeks old, we were already managing transition plans for 4 clients. Not leads, not prospects, clients. One Friday morning, I found myself on a Zoom call with 3 members of Brightwater Learning's executive board. They'd asked for a conversation, but the tone shifted about 5 minutes in. "We want to move all existing consulting and systems strategy to Northline," Priya Rao said, voice steady. "We just need to understand how soon you'll be ready to support that scale." I had to mute my mic for a second, not to cough, not to pause, but to breathe. Because that meant an additional $19 million in advisory oversight over the next 8 months. "I'll be ready," I said. "We'll scale responsibly, but we'll meet your timeline." And that was the start of it. The turn. The moment when Northline stopped being a post-corporate idea and became a threat to an entire firm that thought it could replace relationships with infrastructure. The call I'd been expecting. On Tuesday morning, I was reviewing onboarding flows for Blue Creek Manufacturing when my phone rang. "Blocked again," I answered. Calm voice. "Ethan Ward?" "Yes. This is Maxine Keller. I'm General Counsel at Virion Systems." Here it was. "I'd like to discuss some concerns regarding client communications. We've been informed that several of your former accounts are in transition. They've contacted me. You understand that your previous employment agreement had language around competitive activity?" "I do. I also understand that I was terminated involuntarily. And per Section 14.2, that nullifies the post-termination non-solicitation clause." Silence on her end. Then, quietly, "You've reviewed it." "I wrote parts of it, Maxine. I remember what I put in." She shifted tone. "Less legal, more strategic. We're hoping you'd consider a structured agreement, perhaps a formal transition plan, something that would allow us to retain part of the client load." "I haven't taken anything. They've left. You should ask why." Before she could respond, I ended the call. Then called Diana. "They're rattled," I said. "They should be," she replied. "Their legal positioning is weak. But prepare for a PR move. If they can't stop you legally, they'll try to reframe the narrative." Reframing. 2 days later, it happened. Virion posted a glowing press release titled, "Virion doubles down on future, focused leadership and next-gen client experience." They didn't mention me directly, but the subtext was obvious. They were losing clients and trying to spin it as strategic reinvention. Then I got an email from someone unexpected. Subject: "Saw the news." From Julia Tran, former Virion marketing director. "Ethan, I'm out. Gave my notice last week. I couldn't keep rewriting truth into fluff. I saw what you're building. If you ever need a strategist who tells the truth before the client asks, I'd like to talk." Asterisk. I scheduled a meeting with her the next day. At 4 p.m., she walked into my small officino ego. No pretense, just a laptop and a folder labeled Authentic Positioning. After 30 minutes, I offered her a contract. Northline's first marketing hire. The week that changed everything. By Friday, we had 7 active clients, $61.4 million in AUM, 1 new team member, 2 firms asking for partnership meetings, and 1 email that caught me off guard from Jeremy McCall. Subject: Phi. Virion sent a senior team to Halberton HQ today. Said they'd lower rates by 20% and reassign our account to a dedicated client concierge. I told them we don't need a concierge. We need someone who knows how our systems talk to our trucks. Asterisk. Keep going, Ward. They're scrambling. Asterisk. Saturday, In the kitchen. Are you resting? Lena asked, pouring coffee while I stared at the whiteboard on our fridge. Trying, I said. But my brain doesn't have a shutdown button. She nodded. That's why you built this. For what? For the people who can't sleep unless they know they're doing something that matters. I looked at her and realized that this wasn't just about business anymore. It was about proving something quietly, irrevocably. That the people who care will always outlast the people who just scale. An unexpected meeting. On Monday, I had coffee with Darren Leto, the CEO of Vortex Systems, the firm that had reached out in Chapter 2. We sat at a cafe on Camden Road, surrounded by developers in hoodies and investors in vests. He slid a folder across the table. Not a proposal, he said, a letter of intent. I opened it. He wanted a 3-year exclusive partnership with Northline for all digital integration advisory, up to $40 million in projects. I closed the folder gently. Why me? I asked. You weren't trying to win my business. That's how I knew I wanted to give it to you. By the end of week 3, Northline had crossed $100 million in managed strategy. I had a staff of 4, a pipeline of 11 more clients, and a feeling I hadn't had in years. Not just momentum, belonging. Not to a system, but to a mission I wrote myself. It started with a voicemail. Ethan, this is Daniel Mercer. I'd like to talk. Not about the past, about the future. I think there's a way forward for both of us. I played it twice, then let it sit. The same Daniel Mercer who'd pushed the termination agreement across the table 4 weeks earlier. The same CEO who called my work legacy. Now leaving a voicemail on a Tuesday morning, in the middle of Northline's most active growth week yet. At 8:45 a.m., I forwarded the voicemail to Diana with a single question. Engage or ignore? Her reply came fast. Engage. But record everything. The meeting. We met Friday, in a private booth at a quiet business club off Providence Road. Daniel looked the same tailored blazer, polished smile, posture of a man used to leading and losing. Ethan, he said, standing. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I shook his hand. No small talk. Just the weight of everything unsaid between us. I'll get straight to it, he said, sliding a folder across the table. I didn't open it. Yet. We miscalculated, he admitted. Your departure created a ripple we didn't expect. Clients we assumed were loyal to the platform weren't. I know. They followed you, which tells us 2 things. 1, your model works. And 2, perhaps we were wrong to frame you as incompatible. I raised an eyebrow. What do you want, Daniel? He leaned in. We want to acquire Northline. The words hung in the air like static. I said nothing, just stared at him. We're prepared to make a full acquisition offer. You stay on as managing director, full autonomy under Virion's new strategic client practice umbrella. Your brand remains. Your staff remains. We absorb operations and offer scale. And in return, we stabilize our market position. I finally opened the folder. $4.7 million. Equity plus immediate cash. A seat at the leadership table. Oversight of all strategic advisory nationwide. A full 180 from the man who once said my style had no future. I looked at him. You built this in a week? We saw the headlines. We saw the client shifts. We understand what this means. No, I said. You understand what it means to lose. The problem with apologies that come late. I walked out of that meeting not angry but sharper. Daniel wasn't there to make peace. He was there to reclaim control. Northline had succeeded too visibly. Too fast. We hadn't poached. We hadn't published hit pieces. We just existed. And that was enough to make the old system afraid. That afternoon, I brought the team into the conference room. Dana, Rafi, Julia, and our newest hire, Chris, a tech strategist who left a major firm to work where client trust actually means something. I laid out the offer. All of it. Then asked a single question. If we join them, what do we lose? No one spoke for a moment. Then Rafi said, our name, even if they keep the brand. Dana added, our freedom, our rhythm. Chris smiled. Our whole reason for starting this in the first place. Julia looked at me. So what's your answer? I looked at them all, then closed the folder and slid it into the shred bin beside the printer. That, when quiet refusal becomes the loudest move. On Monday morning, I sent Daniel a short email. Daniel, I appreciate the offer, truly. But Northline wasn't built to be acquired. It was built to exist outside the system that taught me people are replaceable. Thank you, but no. Asterisk. Ethan Ward. An hour later, a message came from one of my contacts inside Virion. He's furious. They already briefed the board. Expected you'd say yes. But I didn't build Northline to win. I built it to mean something. That afternoon, 2 more clients signed. Not because of the rejection, but because our silence told a better story than any press release could. The unexpected ripple. The next day, I received a LinkedIn message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Subject: following your lead. From Noah Peltier, former senior strategist at Virion. Ethan, you don't know me well. We crossed paths once at a company retreat, but I've been watching, quietly. I'm giving my notice tomorrow, and I just wanted you to know. It's because I finally saw a version of this industry I could believe in again. Asterisk. If you're ever hiring, I'll bring everything I've got. Asterisk. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Because this was the real turn. Not in revenue, not in press, but in people, in culture, in meaning. Friday night, at home. Lena poured wine. I grilled steak. We sat outside, the breeze slow and generous. You turned down $5 million, she said. I smiled. I know. You okay with that? I looked around. Thought about the team. The calls. The trust. $5 million would have bought me comfort, I said. But I didn't build Northline for comfort. I built it so no one would ever have to feel the way I did when they slid that folder across the table. She clinked her glass gently to mine. To saying no, she whispered. To building something worth saying no for, I replied. It was late, just past 11 p.m., and the office was dark, except for the soft glow from my laptop. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. I stayed behind not to work, but to write something I'd put off for 6 weeks. Not a pitch. Not a proposal. Not a strategy deck. A letter. The one I never sent. To Daniel Mercer, CEO, Virion Systems. I've drafted this message a dozen times, then deleted it, then told myself silence was stronger. But tonight, I realized silence sometimes becomes another form of unfinished business. You once told me my style had no place in the future of your company. You said I was legacy, and I didn't argue. I just left. What you didn't see was that legacy is not a flaw, it's a foundation. One built on late nights, hard calls, real trust, and showing up when everyone else had a more scalable process. In your world, legacy meant slow. In mine, it meant solid. You fired me, then offered to buy back everything I built outside your walls. You framed it as a business move. But this company, these clients, this team, they're not a move. They're the reason I never belonged in your system in the first place. So no, I won't sell. And no, I don't regret not responding when you asked for a smooth transition of legacy accounts. They weren't legacy. They were loyal. And loyalty never belonged to Virion. It belonged to people who earned it. So this is the resignation letter I never got to give you. I resign from the idea that trust is transferable. I resign from the belief that people are resources. I resign from the culture that confuses efficiency with connection. And most of all, I resign from ever believing I needed your permission to be valuable. Sincerely, Ethan Ward, founder, Northline Strategic. I didn't send it, but I saved it, not as a grudge. As a reminder, 3 months later, we moved into our permanent office space, a quiet, 3-story building on a tree-lined stretch of East Boulevard, complete with a small courtyard, a wall of whiteboards, and a conference room named Legacy, just to amuse ourselves. We were elf people now, managing over $190 million in strategy and infrastructure projects. Know that. No flashy press. Just referrals. Just trust. The kind that stays earned. Julia designed our new welcome kit. Inside it, she placed a note we'd all agreed on. We're not here to outscale the system. We're here to outlast it. The email that ended it. One morning, as I reviewed weekly pipeline metrics, I noticed a name in the inbox I hadn't expected to see again. From Daniel Mercer. Subject: thank you. Ethan, I won't bother with another offer. I know the answer. I read the letter. Or rather, Julia forwarded it to me. She said you never sent it, but you left it where someone loyal enough might. You were right. Not just about the business. About the culture. I'm leaving Virion. The board pushed for a change. But honestly, I think I'd already resigned from the job. I just hadn't written my letter yet. Asterisk. If you're ever willing, I'd like to grab a coffee. No agenda, just closure. Asterisk. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because I didn't need closure anymore. Some things close themselves. The final frame. 6 months to the day after I was fired, Lena handed me a wrapped gift box during breakfast. No tag, no ribbon, just weight and intention. Inside was a framed quote. You weren't replaced. You were released. I stood there, stunned. You wrote that in your notebook, she said. Month 1. I read it one night when you fell asleep at the desk. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I placed the frame on the wall just above my office door so I'd see it every time I walked in. Not as a reminder of what happened, but as a reason to never forget what came after. The last sentence. Late that evening, I opened the notebook again, the same black one I'd started the day I left. And on the last page I wrote, I built something they couldn't measure, so they let it go. Now they call it value, but I've always called it trust.